Welcome back to the Single Malt Review, where today we're looking at a brand new release, just arrived in New Zealand, fresh off the boat.
It's me! I'm back! And boy, oh boy, is it good to be back. No more bloody whole days on aeroplanes. But when you're in aeroplanes, then you're in airports. And one of the good things about airports is duty free. So while I sit on my groaning pile of Scotland documentary media, which I do I promise I'm making that is coming together. We will have that for you very soon. Destination Scotland is very much on its way. In the meantime, we've got something just a little bit more exclusive for you. It is the Johnnie Walker travel exclusive range, the Explorers Club collection, with all kinds of interesting things. They're blended whiskey, so I thought I'd grab one of these and see what was going on. Now, this one is the Gold Route. They have a couple of others, and just like regular Johnnie Walker, they vary quite significantly in price, although it's very much quality inferred with the travel selection, because none of them have a age statement, and this is no different. So I bought this one because it was relatively affordable. It's the middle of the range one, and the design kind of reminded me of Green Label, which is probably the Johnnie Walker that's closest to my heart. So I thought we'll have a roll on that one and see what's going on, and so we shall. Do you have a favourite Walker blend?
I'm not sure. I think I've tried the green, courtesy of you at one point. Is the green normally the... Oh, that's their pure malt blend, is that right?
Green is the pure malt, which is very odd that both a Johnnie Walker in this day and age and a blended whiskey in this day and age from such a mega brand is a pure malt, one of the last left in the world. Green, I think, is excellent. We should really do an episode on it now that it has come back. It was discontinued for a year or two there, but much to the public chagrin, and now it's come back. So there you go. Internet petitions can achieve something.
Yeah, I've seen no indication of any reference to grain alcohol content on the label or on the surrounding literature for this one. Do you know? Family either way?
No, yeah, and that's not uncommon. I mean, they'll be very... They hold these sort of statistics very close to their chest. They don't want to let you know how much is in there. The most they'll say is, it's got a very high malt content. It's really only little... cottage blends, I guess you could call them, that get technical enough to tell you exactly how much malt versus grain they've got in there. So this one I haven't a clue, and I doubly haven't a clue because, as we're going to discover, it's one of the blended whiskies which makes it slightly difficult to tell what its constituents is. So
if it was pure malt, I'm sure that'd be front and centre on the label.
Yes,
it's not, so we can assume it is in fact.
Very much not pure malt, very much coloured, very much chill filtered, what you'd expect from a blended whiskey. But never mind, that doesn't necessarily preclude it from being any good. So we'll have a wee quick look, and one of the first things we'll discover is why it's difficult to ascertain what's in there. Because it is, far from being like the Green Label, a very peaty whiskey.
Yes.
Peaty really to a greater extent than even Black Label, which is for sort of very popular blends, quite a peaty whiskey, quite up front with its peatiness, courtesy of Colila normally. So I'll assume that's what's going on here. And when you have a lot of peat in a blended whiskey, the dominant peaty flavour makes it quite difficult to really ascertain what level of malt versus what level of grain you're dealing with, because the grain, unless they've done something extremely strange, is never peaty. But the peated malt in there really carries through across the whole spectrum of the palate and makes itself very well known. So it's difficult to really scientifically say, I think there's a half and half or a 40-60. I think they've probably gone with something like a 40-60. That's where I'd sort of, given the price point of this whiskey, which is not particularly high, that's what I would sort of estimate. But anyway, enough about the tech specs. Let's see what's really in here.
I can ascertain some acetone. There's a little bit of an industrial solventy undertone there, but in contrast to the recently reviewed Dewar's White Label, it's very subdued. There's a lot of peat, a lot more actual whiskey aromas predominating.
There's certainly a young certainly a young edge on it, but it is significantly tempered by quite a rich malty softness as well as the peat, and that is a link to the not so long lost now Green Label. Green Label is a lovely, lovely malty whisky, courtesy of its Cragganmore and Linkwood constituents. Two distilleries very dear to my heart, and two distilleries which produce a very, very full-on, malty, rich style of whisky, and I think that really, really is the building block which that whisky is constructed around. This one is a little harder to nail down. This one, really, really quite peaty up front, and if it's anything to judge by, I'd say that's probably Collilo coming in. Possibly Talisker, they've got access to Talisker, but I think Collilo.
It's putting me in mind of some of the peaty but not overpowering Brookladdies. Less likely to be that, possibly, but just be kind of, that's the vibe I'm getting.
No, unless they did some rather funny deal, I think they'd have a little trouble getting Brookladdy, because another megacorp owns that one, and I don't know how the backroom dealings go with trading malt between each other. I'm sure they happen. But anyway, let's see what's on the palate.
It's a lot of prickly peat straight up. Quite fiery and forceful too, despite the modest 40% bottling strength.
It has a lot of punch for 40%. It's anything but watery. It's not... It is... Without getting anyone's hopes up, this is not a replacement for Green Label. It does not have the density, it does not have the... doesn't have the character and the fullness of the Green Label, and I'm sure that's because it's not a pure malt blend, and I'm sure it's also because it's a little bit younger on average. Green Label has a 50, we should be so lucky, 15-year age statement, so we know how old that one is, and that's pretty old for a lot of those malt whiskies going in. This one does not, so it'll be more of a balancing act depending on what they've put in it.
That peat has more of it's got the fairly sharp, almost bitumen characters of, say, an Ardbeg peat, as opposed to the softer, loamy, more earthy peat you could find in Bowmore or the like.
It's a drier whisky than not. The box, which I'll just fish out, has just a wee bit of information on it, and it strongly implies that this could be from 100% bourbon.
Yeah, American oak.
So the flavours we would be looking for would be the sort of vanilla, coconut, that sort of thing. But it always makes it a more difficult exercise when you throw that amount of peat into the mix, because that tends to rather override some of these more subtle flavours, especially when you're dealing with young whisky. And I wonder if there isn't just a tiny bit more peat in here than is really 100% warranted, as far as my taste goes anyway.
I'm definitely getting a little vanilla, honey, a splash of bourbon and a touch of dark rum.
It's certainly not to say there aren't other things in there. They are all those things you mentioned, the standard write down for bourbon maturation, but there is some fruit in there as well. There's some Speyside characters. There's a little bit of berry, but it's all really quite second fiddle to the peat.
Some tart, sour cherry or gooseberry.
But what it is a very, very lively whisky, and it's a very enlivening whisky. Very, very much a before dinner. It really wakes you up and wakes up the taste buds. So there's certainly value in that. I think, given what this is priced at, and given that you can only get it in the duty free, which is a slightly odd move, actually, limiting your market to duty free travellers only is a slightly weird move. But I'm sure top men were on the case when they devised that particular program. However, for me, scores-wise, holding this up against other Johnnie Walker blends particularly, I think you probably do just a little bit better going for Black Label, which is a 12-year-old statement, and I think you're probably getting more or less, on average, the same age whisky as you're getting in here, and you're getting it significantly cheaper. I just don't think this has quite enough to reach up above the what's offered by Black Label, and maybe even double black, because this is getting near the level of peat. It's a bit like it's halfway between or maybe halfway between black label, double black, and green. It's a really odd mix, but in terms of doing its own thing, I don't think it's doing quite enough for me. So I'm going to give it a blend score of a 75. What's your thoughts?
I'm actually quite impressed as blends go. I mean, the peat is strong and punchy, but it's not overwhelming. It occludes some of those other flavours, but doesn't drown them out entirely. It means they take more time to develop. You experience more as you taste longer and get used to that peat. So the peat really, I think, carries this one. Even with a bit of water, that's got sweeter and softer, more minerals and more fruit on the palate already. I'm quite partial to it. I mean, it's still not rating hugely high because it's got, again, a lot of grain alcohol characters coming through, and that brings almost any blend down. But I'd happy giving this one a 70.
Well, there you go. Not a bad one as far as Walker blends go, and if you are going through duty free, it's certainly one of the more affordable options, and you can also be guaranteed this lovely litre bottle, so you get a wee bit more for your buck. It's sort of where duty free is going these days. It's not so much cheaper prices, it's just slightly larger bottles. So make sure you pick something up that you want quite a lot of, because that's the way to save money there. Duty free, I think, spirals well out of control once you start trying to buy old whiskey there. So I would maybe warn people off that. It's a good place to get young whiskey, and it's a good place to get blends, but don't be fooled in spending too much money, because they will certainly imply exclusivity to things that are not as exclusive as maybe they imply they are. Always check your prices against what you can buy in your own country at your own whiskey shop, because in many cases, duty-free, the myth that it's cheaper is just doesn't pan out, especially in this day and age. So, at any rate, if you want this one, that's where you'll have to go. So, book a flight, I suppose. You only have to go, whatever the closest country it is. Probably fly to Amsterdam. I hear that's cheap. Anyway, this has been the Single Malt Review. I am Tim, and I am back, and it's good to be back. So I will go get my pickaxe and go back down the mines of my computer and start working on this Destination Scotland footage to bring this to you. So we will have... we're back, is what I'm trying to say. We're going to have content coming your way, every different direction, so buckle up. But in the meantime, Sludger, keep safe.